Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be taking a look at an expansion for Furnace. This is Furnace Interbellum. Furnace is a game that is kind of played in two phases. You've got an auction type of a phase, or a bidding, and then you've got an engine building kind of phase. And this expansion is a modular one that allows you to add either certain parts of it or all of it all together. Let me head over to the table. I'll kind of show you the parts and how it changes things. I'm not doing a full overview of the game. And then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. Furnace Interbellum is a modular expansion, meaning that you could use just portions of it, or you can easily also throw everything in there. I'm just going to go through this one by one, each little part of the expansion. I'm not going to try to explain how the game works. I will link the review of the base game in with this video, so if you want to take a look at how the base game plays, you could take a look at that video. This is just going to be showing off the new aspects of it and what it adds. So first thing it adds is it adds a teal player, which you can now make into a fifth player that you can add to the base game. So you can now play at 5 players. One new aspect of this expansion are these variable capital discs, and if you choose to play with these, the way these work is that during the auction phase, they're always going to start at a value of 0, but you can bid a certain number of coal to make this a value. So if you wanted to bid 3 coal, you can just spend that 3 coal, and now this is another disc of this value that you can place onto a card, just as you normally would in the auction phase. These have 2 sides, and they could theoretically go above 10 by putting more coal on the disc if it was at this 9+. So that's the standard way to play with these variable capital discs. They do say that if you want to play with them, but with less experienced players, you can have a little bit of a variant, which is called the capital growth variant, which is simplified, which just means that basically the value of these are going to equal whatever round you're at. So in the first round, they'd be worth 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. But the standard way to play it would be that you are going to bid a certain number of coal dependent upon what you want that value to be. There are new startup cards that come with the game. You can choose to play with just these cards, depending on player count, or you can mix them with the base games. There are also new capitalist cards that you can play with. Again, you can choose just from here, or you can add them to the game. This actually is going to be replacing the capitalist card from the base game as well, but new capitalist cards, new startup cards, you can choose to add those or mix and match as you prefer. You have 24 new double-sided company cards in the game, and it is most balanced if you set up the game in a particular way where you'll be taking 24 cards from the base game and adding them to these 24. It's a relatively simple process. You could just take 24 of random cards from the base game and add them to these, but it won't be quite as balanced that way. There are some kind of new effects and terms that are in these cards, so let me show you just a couple of examples of those. First of all, you've got something that's going to happen immediately like this when you win the bid. And so when you win the bid on this card, if you win this card, you immediately get an upgrade token. There are also some that work that way on the upgraded side. So as soon as this card upgrades, you would get those 2 upgrade tokens. You also have deliveries and sales. So something along this line where you've got a resource on the right side would be considered like a conversion, I should say, not a delivery, conversion. And then this is selling, so you would have money to the right side. All right. You also have some permanent effects that are in these blue backgrounds, okay, and they are not resolved when you resolve the card, but they become active the moment you receive it, including during the auction phase. So you've got some basic and upgraded sizes as well, but this is just going to give you some type of a permanent effect throughout the game as soon as you get it. Another module you can choose to play with are these business school cards and manager tokens. If you choose to play with this, the way it's going to work is depending on player count, you'll either have 2 or 3 or all 3 of these cards, and they're going to be at the end of the lineup of those company cards. So they would be resolved last. And you're going to be placing one of these manager tokens face up on each of the cards. You'll bid on these cards just as per normal, but the winner will not take the card. Instead, they will take the manager token from that card, and then they're going to have this that they can place during the production phase on any of their cards to resolve the effect. Sometimes it's going to be something like this, which is a one-time effect of discarding a card to gain more money, or it might be something like this, which is going to kind of change how you can use and utilize those resources. At the top, you've got the different compensations, and on these you have kind of a choice. And depending upon the amount you put on it, so maybe if someone won the tile with a 4, but you had placed a 3 on there, you would get 3 compensation actions, and you can split those how you want. You can take 2 of one and 1 of the other, for example. And so that's going to be how these work. They'll always stay out. The cards always stay out. The manager tokens get placed in your area that you can use during the production. If any card does not get 1, then you just simply discard that manager token until the next round. Finally, the game includes these agent cards, and what these cards are used for is to either supplement the 2-player game or allow you for the first time to play the game solo. If you're playing a 2-player game, you're going to choose one of these agents, and they're going to be competing along with you, and they're going to have a particular number of things. So for example, if you look at this oil tycoon, it tells you what their variable capital disk is going to be set at. For them, it's always going to be at a value of 4. And then they also have particular targets that they're going to be looking for their cards. They're going to have different compensation transactions and what it's going to do during the production phase. These all work slightly differently, but they give you a pretty good idea of what they're going for, and they are competing along with the players for money. If you do not have more money than the agents at the end of the game, you lose to them. In a solo game, you'll pick 2, you'll place 1 to the left of your area and 1 to the right, and you'll compete against both of those agents. So again, it allows you to either supplement the 2-player game to have a little bit more competition going on, or play against 2 of the agents to allow the game to be solo. All right, well, other than some extra components to kind of beef up for the 5-player game, more oil, more coal, more iron, more money, that is Furnace Interbellum. Let's head back over and we'll let you know what we think. All right, so there you see what kind of the new elements that Interbellum adds to the base game of Furnace. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is what you would call a modular expansion, where there are different elements that you can add either piecemeal, 1, 2, or you can add everything in there if you want to. Just right off the bat, I will state that I like every one of the new elements that Interbellum adds to the game. I think that some are maybe the stars of the expansion for me personally, and I'll get to that in a moment. But let's just start off with the new cards. So the new company cards that you can add in, they are interesting. They are more complex, I would say. They have more complex interactions. And, you know, with some of those permanent abilities on there. And the reason I'm bringing this up, that these cards, I think, add a little bit more complexity to the game, is that I don't know that this is an expansion that I would necessarily introduce new players of Furnace to. Because I do think that it ups the complexity of the game, generally speaking. All of the elements do. So I think for a new player, unless they are like they like really heavy games, I wouldn't say that Furnace is heavy with the Interbellum expansion, but it is heavier. And it might be easier to just kind of ease them into the base game and then add, you know, some or all of the elements at that point. But the new company cards are good. They just have a little bit more complexity, and some of the wording on them can be a little bit tricky to interpret. So just, you want to make sure that you are reading them very carefully, making sure you're understanding the intent. There is in the rule book some kind of clarifications on those cards, and so you may want to make sure you're checking those to make sure you understand the intent of the cards. But they can make them a bit more complex. So those new company cards are good. The new capitalist cards are great, and the startup cards. All of that is nice just to add to some variety to Furnace. So if you've played Furnace a lot, this is going to be something that is going to kind of bring some new life to it, just with those things. Then you get the brand new elements. So you've got things like those variable capital discs. I think those are great. It's a simple addition, but it adds a little bit of spice, being able to bid those cold cubes. So now they're not just being used to kind of trigger card effects and things along those lines, or conversions, but now they're giving you another source of capital that you can use to bid on these cards. So I really like those. I think the business school cards and the manager tokens are great. It's a really neat addition to the game because not only is it giving you something new to bid on, but they kind of change the compensation on those cards as well. So those business school cards have that compensation that's kind of an or, where you can choose and you can, mix and match. So if you get a 3 compensation on one of those cards, you can take 2 from one and 1 from the other. I think that's really good because even if you're not necessarily interested in the manager token on that business school card, you're more compelled to bid for that, to compete for that, because the compensation on them is good. I think that's a smart design decision to kind of give a little bit of a spicier compensation, because those manager tokens, while they're very cool, can be somewhat situational. And there may be times where you're just not really interested in the power that's going to give you. But if it is something you're interested in, you're really going to go heavy into that, because I like that now that is going to be something that's going to kind of buff your production phase a little bit. It's a neat little kind of a twist on how you're going to run your engine. So all of those are great. To me, the star of this expansion are the agent cards, because it does one of 2 things. It allows you to make the 2-player game more compelling by adding in one of the agents, and now you've got more competition over that market that you've got going on there. But it also allows you to play the game solo, where you can play against 2 of the agents, one on your left and one on your right. And so as a player of solo games, and as someone that really liked Furnace, I was particularly excited about the notion of a solo variant, and it's done very, very well here. This is a mode of the game that is obviously well thought out, and makes for a compelling solo experience, and makes this 2-player game, as I said, more spicy, I would say. So I like that quite a bit. Overall, I think Interbellum is a very, very strong expansion for a game that I already liked. I'm going to be giving this an 8 out of 10, an easy recommendation. I do think, again, that I want to emphasize that this is an expansion that adds to the complexity level of Furnace. And so I don't know if this is something that I would introduce new players of the game to. So keep that in mind. You may want to get a couple at least of the base games of Furnace in before you start involving this expansion, at least if you're going to do it all in one. I think certain elements are easier to incorporate than others. I think those variable capital discs, sure, you could put that in right away. I don't think that's terribly complex. But the new company cards can be a little bit tricky. The agents, if you're in a 2-player game, that can certainly add to some of the complexity there too. And the business school and the manager tokens, again, depending on the type of player, if there's somebody that plays heavier games, it may not be anything to them. But the base game of Furnace was a medium weight game, I think, at most, and so it wasn't a gateway game by any means, but it wasn't the heaviest of games. This definitely ramps up that complexity a bit. All right, well, that's it for me. This is Mike DiLisio, signing off from Dice Tower headquarters.